Take each game on its merits there.
Hello, and you're very welcome to our latest episode of Each Game on Its Merits. My name is Eibhilin O'Reardon.
And I'm Jerry Farrell.
And today we are talking about the first of the two games played in 1931 between Spain and Ireland. So Ireland travelled to Barcelona in April of 1931 to take on the Spanish in a friendly international, because it's all we played, Jerry, in those days were friendly internationals, and we come away with a credible 1-1 draw. So what I will do first is I'll pick my way through the old starting lineup.
Indeed.
And we'll pick out a few of the players who actually make their debuts. We'll focus on them, also focus on some of the Spanish players who had a bit of checkered lives previous to this and afterwards, because the Spanish Civil War is only 5 years away. And we'll go from there. So this Spanish team actually, Jerry, they had gotten a silver medal in the 1920 World Cup, and after this they compete in the silver medal in the 1920 Olympics.
Yes.
And then some of them actually still play in the 1934 World Cup.
Yeah, so the silver medal, we mentioned Belgium and that unconventional win at the 1920 Olympics. The Czechoslovakian team, who are beaten or walk off the pitch in that final, don't get the silver medal because they've walked off. They're basically kicked out of the tournament. So there's actually a little playoff to see who wins the silver medal, and Spain do win it, as you say. And obviously some of those players are still around 11 years later, but more of them are kind of younger players who are coming in that are going to maybe make a mark at the first European held World Cup in 1934, which is going to be held in Italy.
So this Irish lineup, Tom Farquharson in goal, friend of the pod.
Indeed, absolutely.
George Lennox, who's making his debut, plays for Dolphin. Paddy Byrne from Dolphin. Sam Robinson, he's listed here as playing for Dolphin. Is that incorrect at that point?
No, Sam Robinson has moved to Dolphin. I have Paddy Byrne actually as at Shells at the time.
Okay, all right. That may be a
typo there. But yeah,
clerical error on my behalf of things.
So Jeremiah Sam Robinson, star for Bohemians through the 20s. Personal friend of Michael Collins, former member of the squad, who we've mentioned on the podcast before. He has moved to Dolphin and is playing professionally now. So Dolphin, I think we've mentioned before, are based in around Dolphin's Barn. If people know where the kind of Dolphin House housing complex is, their pitch was roughly around there.
Okay, right. So Harry Shatton from Chatton.
I'm going to say Chatton
from Shells. Sean Byrne from Bows making his debut. John Joe Flood from Rovers. Charlie Dowdall. Paddy Moore. We're now introduced to the great Paddy Moore of Shamrock Rovers from Clonliffe Avenue, just beside Croke Park there in Ballybock. Come back to him in a second. Charlie Reid making his debut from Brideville, and Peter Kavanagh from Glasgow Celtic. Why do I have Peter Kavanagh written down? Is that true?
That's right. So Peter Kavanagh is the youngest member of the Bohemians team that wins everything in 27-28. He's only 18. He comes in as a left winger. He presses Willie Maley, who's the manager of Glasgow Celtic, in a friendly match played in 1928, and apparently he was the Celtic team were actually over to look at another Bows player, but he's so impressive as a young man. He's signed up by Glasgow Celtic and plays for them for a couple of seasons. He also has kind of a career south of the Scottish border. He plays for Northampton Town, and then he goes back up to Scotland. He plays for Hibernian for a while as well. Okay, sorry, I just got confused there between him and Patsy Gallagher, two completely different names, but there you go. Okay, so Paddy Moore though, what an incredible, interesting guy. There's a plaque there. If anybody's ever in Ballybock and walks down Clonliffe Avenue, there's actually a plaque outside his family home. Yeah, it's a small little one-story cottage, but it's a nice plaque put up by the local residents, I think.
Yeah, and the family's involved as well, but it's certainly worth a look. So this game anyway, Spain won, the Republic of Ireland, well, we'll call them the Republic of Ireland, the FAI Ireland won. Ireland actually took the lead in this game through Paddy Moore, scores on his debut, and then there's a very swift equaliser. So the game as described in the book here, Ireland on the Ball by Donal Cullen, and I'll just show it there to the camera. The game kicked off 40 minutes late due to a pre-match athletics and rugby exhibitions.
And we're going to talk a little bit later about why this was and what was happening that prompted this display.
I have to say, if I went to a game and it was delayed 40 minutes due to athletics and rugby exhibitions, I think I would be a little bit irritated by that.
Multi-sports fan, eh?
Not really, no. I have my limits. Yeah. Anyway, so Spain pressured early on, and Piera struck the crossbar with a shot. From a breakaway, Flood pass to Moore, who scored with a neat chip over Zamora's head. Now, Zamora, the goalkeeper. Now, this neat chip, we understand, was a bit of a dink.
Yeah.
A bit of a classy move from our friend Paddy Moore, making his debut in Barcelona.
This man is maybe, I think he might be 21 at this stage.
Zamora, right.
Paddy
Moore, sorry.
So Paddy Moore is making his debut. He's come through as a young player. He's got to move over to play in Britain. He has a kind of unsuccessful spell at Cardiff City. He doesn't settle. He's a bit of a home bird. He comes back home though, and he has a fantastic season for Shamrock Rovers. He's pivotal in their success that season, and he gets his first cap. And well, do you want to finish reading that, and we might talk about both Paddy and Zamora, because they're two very interesting, very eccentric.
Well, in Brian Kerr's kind of language, he's a kind of a tippy-tappy, kind of a chippy kind of a guy. Anyway, clearly goes through on goal and flicks it over the head of... I don't know what it is about 1930s football. You assume it to be quite brutal and direct.
And it is, because we've talked an awful lot about head injuries and serious injuries and this sort of stuff, but it has the other side as well. Now,
Spain equalised when, following a scramble, Arroca headed in a centre from Piera. Right, in the second half, a light rain made the ground slippy. With 10 minutes left, and we're clinging on to dear life for our 1-1 draw. Zamitier, my Spanish obviously is desperate, raced in as Farquharson gathered the ball. The goalkeeper held his ground and the centre forward bounced off him. The referee awarded a penalty, but Farquharson got to the spot kick and fisted it away. And you apparently, from your research, say that the Spanish crowd were very impressed with Farquharson.
Yeah, the reports say that Farquharson is cheered very loudly by the Spanish crowd. So, and we'll come on to it in later games, because Ferguson is obviously playing in the top flight of English football for Cardiff City. He's won an FA.
By all accounts, a total headbanger.
A bit like quite a quiet person, but in his demeanour and displays and some of the stuff he does is prone to kind of acts of
violence.
Yeah. But he's also
threatens violence.
He did threaten someone with a gun apparently at half time. But if you're a goalkeeper at the time, if you're playing in British football, you can be barged into the net. So he's used to big, bustling 6'2" centre forwards trying to bash him into the goal.
Right.
He's expecting that.
He's taking no shit off some Spanish young fella.
Well, he's off Jose Samitier, who ends up being Barcelona's record goal scorer for about 30 years. Very impressive player. We'll come on to him later. So he's expecting to be charged into the goal. He's not. Samitier isn't expecting him to stand his ground and basically kind of smash him a bit with his shoulder.
He's a friend of Salvatore Dali.
He's a friend of Salvador Dali. He's a friend of Francisco Franco. He's an interesting character, and we're going to come on. They call him the surrealist. They call him the grasshopper because of his kind of style of play.
He's no friend of Tom Farquharson. Yes, that's all we care about.
Tom Farquharson is very much in the real world. Granite jawed, iron shouldered goalkeeper. But anyway,
so
Miche is floored. Guiburu of Valencia, has a shot. Farquharson saves it. And I should say the crowd, depending which report you read, is somewhere between 80 and 100,000. So
yeah, it says 100,000 here.
So apart from maybe Farquharson, the biggest crowd that any of them would have played in front of, Farquharson would have played in front of a huge crowd in the FA Cup final, but this is much bigger than, say, Paddy Byrne or George Lennox would have played in front of for Dolphin or Shells or whoever.
Right.
So a huge crowd, huge reaction. But we talk a bit about Paddy Moore, because he and Tom Farquharson are the heroes of the era. Now, the match reports are glowing in praise of basically the whole team. They say it's a great team effort, especially the centre of the park is very strong. Ferguson, we've kind of mentioned a lot, and I'd say he's a bit of a hero on the podcast. And we'll come on to why, even more so why that is in the next episode. But Paddy Moore, as we say, he's come back from Cardiff City. He's had a great season with Shamrock Rovers. He's making his debut. Paddy Moore's about 5'5", so he's Maradona height. He's kind of small, stocky, low centre of gravity, so Maradona build. If you ever read any of the reports from players of that time, there's a great feature piece that Sean Ryan did about him many years ago, I think in the 1980s, where he interviewed a lot of players who would have played with Paddy Moore. The one comparison they all make, for a few reasons, is that they all compare him to George Best.
I've heard this, yeah.
That he has this amazing ability, this low centre of gravity, this dribbling, close control skill that's out of this world that no one else could believe. And also, I suppose he has a kind of tragic later life that mirrors George Best a bit as well. But at this stage, he's a 21-year-old centre forward. He's coming against Ricardo Zamora in that goal. Zamora would have played in that stadium a lot. He was a star goalkeeper for Barcelona. He is the highest paid player in the world by some accounts. Real Madrid have just signed him and for 150,000 pesetas, and he's getting paid a huge amount of money per week. So he's getting paid something like 30,000 or 3,000 pesetas a week, which works out about 50 quid a week.
And he gets chipped by a young fella from Ballybock.
So if he's being paid £50 a week in the money at the time, and the maximum wage in England is less than a tenner.
Wow.
So you can see he is a superstar. He is
very dapper.
Very dapper. He's called Il Divino, the Divine One. He hangs around with movie stars. One of his teammates said he was as famous as Greta Garbo and better looking. This guy is a superstar. He isn't. He literally he's a movie star. He's in films. They make movies about him. He's a big box office draw. He wears a pure white woolen jersey and a flat cap, and he stands out. Apparently, he goes off the touchline at times and talks to members of the crowd when he gets bored. He's a real eccentric, but he's dinked by a 21-year-old from
think that might happen
Ballybock
in the Phoenix Park.
Yes, so he's shown up. The greatest goalkeeper in the world by some accounts.
He later gets imprisoned during the Civil War. I have in my notes here. And he played for a Catalan 11. The goal scorer for Spain,
Angel Arocha.
203 goals in 210 Barcelona appearances.
Yeah, he's a superstar. He's part of the first Barcelona team to win La Liga.
And he gets killed in the Spanish Civil War.
He's killed in a bombing raid, and he's fighting for the Francoist side. He's killed in a bombing raid, and he's a Spanish international. This is look, we'll come on to it maybe a little bit later, but let's go back to the start of that game. The game is delayed, as you say, because there's not only is there rugby and athletics, there's also a whole lot of political speeches, which I think might bore even more people. Commentary. Anyway, so we're speaking about one Zamora. We'll talk about another, because literally in the weeks before this game, Niceto Alcala Zamora is the new president of Spain. So Spain, prior to this,
we all know this.
Yes, but Spain prior to this had not been a democracy. It had been, notionally had a King Alonso XIII, who was a big sports fan, big football fan. So people will know Real Madrid, Real Betis, Real Sociedad. That Real prefix, Royal, was bequeathed on them by King Alonso XIII. He's a big soccer fan, big soccer fan. And he's giving royal patronage to all these clubs. But from 1923 onwards, Spain is ruled by a dictatorship when he's not nominally the king, but the man who's really calling the shots is a military man called Primo de Rivera. So basically, Primo isn't so primo come 1930 or so.
Primo, you make him sound like he's from Dublin.
Yeah, alright, Primo.
But
Primo is eventually removed from power. The monarchist side in the parliament kind of don't have a great election, and it's kind of, the writing is on the wall that, the king should abdicate. He doesn't have popular support. So King Alfonso XIII goes off into the distance. He kind of moves off to France and things like that. His grandson is actually Juan Carlos the First, who's the first post-Franco king of Spain. So this guy Zamora is the first kind of president of what's called the Second Spanish Republic. Now, the Second Spanish Republic, unfortunately, doesn't last very long. It's officially dissolved in 1939 with the defeat of the Republican side in the Spanish Civil War. But this guy Zamora, it becomes president. Apparently, Joseph Stalin, such is the fame of Ricardo Zamora, the goalkeeper, when he's told that the new president of Spain is a guy called Zamora, he said, "What? The goalkeeper?" So this shows, even if Stalin knows who you are, that's how famous you are.
You're pretty well known.
But this guy Zamora, this is a big, and obviously Barcelona is not very a monarchist city. They have a very strong, Catalan identity.
Yes.
Although again, this is all very complex because. Look, I have the book here as well. I'd recommend it to anyone. The Sid Lowe's great book, Fear and Loathing in La Liga, about the Barcelona Real Madrid rivalry, and he kind of does away with this idea that it's a simple binary. Barcelona were anti-monarchist and anti-Franco, and Real Madrid were pro-monarchist and pro-Franco. This isn't really the case. Many senior members of Real Madrid are killed by the Francoist side during the Second World War, the Spanish Civil War.
Bit like a lazy assumption that all GA people in this period were Republicans, and every soccer player had a nudge or a nod to the empire or whatever.
Yeah, these neat divisions don't work. This is part of the background. There's 100,000 people there. They're here to see Ireland, of course. They're here to see Paddy Moore, but they're also kind of celebrating the fact that they now have a republic. And Barcelona is quite a Republican city.
Okay, so a major figure actually in Spanish football at this time is another friend of the pod, Patrick O'Connell.
Yes.
And while this game is being played, he's manager of Real Oviedo. This is the person who has played in the 1914 team, captained the 1914 team that won the home championships. He then ends up in Spain. He manages quite a number of clubs.
He's been captain of Man United prior to that. He's done all this amazing stuff.
Yeah. He managed Real Betis. After this period, to a La Liga title in 1935, he later becomes manager of Barcelona. A serious influence in Spanish football, and not the only one, because a previous manager of Real Madrid in the early 1900s was a man called Arthur Johnson from Blackrock. Now, if you go into
Blackrock in Dublin now, not the one up by Dundalk.
No, Blackrock in Dublin now. Apparently, if you go into Real Madrid's ground and there's an interactive museum, I understand, you type in the number of players from a certain country and you type in Ireland, they don't have him registered as Irish, because I think he registered himself as English. I think it was more financially beneficial to be registered as English, but he would have scored, I think, in the first El Clasico game for Real Madrid. Yeah,
so he's a player, he's a coach, and of course, he's going over there in the early part of the 20th century. So, Ireland is still part of the United Kingdom, and there's a lot of confusion as well, because a lot of, I suppose it's that fluid identity idea that people did consider them both Irish and British at the same time, and they didn't find any difficulty in defining themselves as such, and even well into this period. And again, it goes back to that identity thing that we're talking about Angel Aroca, who's ends up being a superstar goal scorer for Barcelona, who scores in this game against Ireland. He's on the Francoist side when people assume that Barcelona were the Republican club. Josep Sunyol, who's their club president, is murdered by Franco's troops early in the war. But then you have other guys, Jacinto Quincoches, I'm going to go with, who's from he's born just outside Bilbao. His family are from Alaves. He's a big star player for Alaves. He then moves to Real Madrid. He ends up in the Francoist militia as well. But Ricardo Zamora, as we've kind of mentioned, during the Civil War, he's considered. He's an interesting character. Him and Josep Samitier are both players who moved from Barcelona to Real Madrid at different times, and they're both pay for a Catalan 11 team. They're both given medals on behalf of the Republic, and they both become kind of associated with Franco down the line. They both end up fleeing the Civil War and going into Spain or going to France, and both end up playing for Nice on the south coast of France as well, before returning to kind of post-war Spain and having very successful careers, both as players, as coaches, as scouts. Samitier has a road named after him on the way to Camp Nou, which is mad when you consider that he also is apparently the man who was involved in make sure Alfredo Di Stefano side for Real Madrid. So it's an incredibly complex, interesting, fascinating Spanish side here, and we're going to have a Spanish football expert on talking about it a little bit later. But just there's so many stories within this team and the team that plays in Dublin in December that you could go down a lot of rabbit holes with it.
So this is a time of great flux actually in Ireland, and we'll speak about this again, but there'll be an election the next year. There's a transfer of power from Cumann na Gael to Fine Gael. There's a Eucharistic Congress. Ireland as a free state is still trying to find its identity. It probably doesn't really link its identity with this team very much. The IFA side are still playing away. In around this time, Tom Farquharson refuses a call up from the IFA
for a game against Scotland. Yes.
Yeah. Is it around this period?
It's in 1931, and we'll come on to that on the next game, because he's actually officially recognised for this. But it goes back to these tensions that exist, that the FAI, or the Football Association of Ireland, or the Free State, are very aggrieved that they have the majority. They look after the majority of the island of Ireland in terms of their authority. 5/6 as they was it, which I don't know if that's geographically correct. Maybe 3/4. But
5/6 sounds like a
bit of an exaggeration.
Not really a Fort Greenfield sort of division there, right? Yeah.
But they're still very annoyed that the IFA are styling themselves as the Irish Football Association. They're calling themselves Ireland. There's no North as a prefix, and they're still quite annoyed that they're selecting players. And on the previous episode, we had Mossy Birmingham on talking about his grandfather Jimmy Birmingham, and that basically there ended up being a high court case because 3 amateur players who were born in Dublin decided to play for the IFA in an amateur international against England. So Alec Morton, Fred Horlicher, and Jimmy Birmingham, and that they got banned by the FAI for doing this. So their backs are up. There's a certain level of animosity between the IFA and the FAI at the moment, and Farquharson becomes a bit of a hero because of the stance he takes, turning down the cap. And I'm saying not just turning down the cap, turning down a generous match fee. Yeah.
So we'll come back to that probably in the next episode, but it does give a lot of validation to the FAI Ireland.
It does.
Celebrated players such as Tom Farquharson chooses the FAI Ireland over the IFA Ireland, which I think he dismisses as the illegitimate Ireland.
Yeah, he basically says the real Ireland is the one that looks after the majority of the country. That's the one, and he actually says, I hope my example will be followed by other players. Just one thing I want to mention, you were saying what's the reaction to this game, this 1-1 draw.
Yeah,
it is kind of treated as a big deal in the press and the Irish football kind of family, if we want to use that term. I'm always cautious using that term, but Irish
who else used that phrase?
Yeah. But Irish fans realise this is a big deal. They report that there's 100,000 people at the game. They also know Spain are really good. Spain have beaten England 2 years ago, and they're the first continental side to do it. They beat them 4-3 in 1929 in a game in Madrid. And this is we talk about beating England in 49 on home soil, but this is the first time they've been beaten by any continental side. They've only been beaten by Ireland, Scotland, Wales prior to this. So instead of it being a wake up call, some English media kind of say, "Oh, this is a terrible situation. We need to buck up." But most of them kind of ignore this as a blip, as an aberration. But we know that that's not the case. So this is a very good Spanish side. The stat I have here, they've got a record of 27 wins in 38 games. As you said, they've got a runners-up medal in the 20 Olympics. They go to the World Cup in 3 years' time and get to the quarterfinals, and are only beaten on a replay in an incredibly violent match by the Italians, who are the hosts. And of course, 34. These are a Republican Popular Front-led republic playing in fascist Italy at the time. And in case you don't pick it up, sports and politics mix.
They do, and they are you can't separate them, and indivisible. And
one thing I say, the FAI think this is a big deal as well, because we've mentioned before that they're a bit stingy, that when Boxer Foley asked for an extra match fee because they play a friendly match against a French club, he's told no. But the FA are so pleased with this, partially because there's an absolutely massive crowd and they make a fortune off this game. This is the first time they make good money off the game. I think I actually have the stats here of how much money they make from the match, or I don't have it to hand, but I think it's something like they make it's over £1,000. So this is actually a sizable profit. The lads all get a £5 match fee, but then they're given a £3 bonus, and they kind of enjoy yourselves on the continent, bring home a few presents for the missus, sort of thing.
They are missing out on these high profile games against Scotland, England, Wales every second year in Dublin.
So it's unusual that
might have been missing out on.
The FAI give the trainer and the full squad a £3 bonus. The one man who misses out, though, we should mention him, Sean Byrne, who's the only amateur in the team. He's playing for Bohemians. Sean Byrne, it's his only cap. He signs for Bohemians in 1926. Prior to that, he's been a Gaelic player. He's been Gaelic footballer for a club side in Dublin. He later ends up playing for Brideville and Shelburne, but this is his only cap, and he's told he can have a £5 voucher for a piece of jewellery. He said, well, look, I don't really want a watch or a medallion or whatever, but could I have a £5 voucher for a new suit of clothes? And he's told, no.
Really?
No.
Jewellery or nothing.
Yeah.
All into the bling, even then.
Yes.
The old FBI. Now, the only piece of memorabilia, or memorabilia, as Tony John Cascarino once called it, in my little collection of jerseys for those watching on YouTube, in terms of Ireland Spanish games, is this shirt from the World Cup in 2002, which is interesting because this is the shirt we wore against Spain in 2002, but it wasn't prepared for Mr. Rory Keane. It was prepared for Colin Healy, who didn't actually make the squad, if you remember. Anybody who remembers that time will know that Colin Healy was going to be a late call-up after Roy Keane's ejection stroke departure, and that's the only sort of Ireland Spanish sort of jersey that I have in my collection. But anyway, that's for another day. We'll get to discuss the 2002 game possibly in about 14 years' time after we've gone through every other game. Right. So we have an interview coming up, and then next week we have a chat about the Ireland-Spanish game at the end of 1931. These games begin to become quick and
we
fast
have
now.
two games a year. This is April 31, and we have a game December 31.
Every year now from now on.
And
it's
big
much
crowds.
more regular. Big crowds.
So we have potentially 80 to 100,000 in Barcelona, and there's a big crowd waiting for in Dublin as well.
And we get hammered.
We do. Spoiler alert. We get
absolutely spanked. So if you want to skip that episode because you don't want hearing about a 5-0 defeat, we understand. But that's
in fact, you're going to be skipping a lot of episodes in this series if you're going to do that, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
the 50s aren't good for us.
There are rough times ahead, man. I mean, we went 4 years without winning the game in the late 60s, early 70s. But that's for the next episode of Each Game on Its Merits.